There's a supernatural detective thriller anime with extremely creative visual storytelling and storyboards, along with jaw-droppingly good action featuring household names like Sherlock Holmes and Arsene Lupin airing during the summer season. This sounds like Detective Bungo Stray Dogs. It's gotta be one of the frontrunners for anime of the year, right? I can't wait to see all of the discussion generated by it. What do you mean it's under shitty anime Harry Potter? Didn't we just get that earlier this year? I can't let this travesty go without doing anything about it. Time to take this into my own hands and push the Undead Murder Farce agenda to the best of my ability. The summer 2023 anime season was a little dry compared to the banger seasons we've been getting so far, and when I was looking for a new show, Undead Murder Farce caught my eye. It was by a studio I wasn't familiar with, but the premise was so intriguing that I had to give it a shot. Immediately I was blown away by how unique this anime was and how it had such a colorful cast of characters that were all bound by this creative supernatural world that was filled to the brim with different species like vampires, oni, and werewolves. The best part is that the main characters of such a star-studded show were a group of three that had phenomenal chemistry, headlined by a literal talking head that is somehow one of the greatest detectives I've ever seen, and a hilarious half-oni, half-human hybrid who treats the most tense of situations as if they were a Rakugo performance. Undead Murder Farce takes place in 1897 during the Tokyo Meiji era during a large-scale extermination of the supernatural, ayakashi, and yokai, known as the Great Purge. Supernatural beings are being reduced to circus acts or are being forced to isolate themselves from human society since they're on the hunt. One of these circus acts is a half-human, half-oni named Tsugaru, who is a pretty goofy guy considering the fact that he's facing inevitable insanity and losing his human self. You see, Tsugaru is a pretty special fella since he's forcibly half-oni. Oni are the most dangerous creatures on the planet and are rather rare. The thing that makes them so dangerous is that Onis are able to stop the regenerative abilities of supernatural creatures, such as vampires. The suck of a lifetime wouldn't save Edward from his wounds if Tsugaru was the one inflicting them. This fact is particularly important as Tsugaru ends up meeting a maid named Shizuku who carries around a covered birdcage, which has, you guessed it, a severed talking human head. What, you thought the birdcage would have a parrot in it or something? Don't be silly. This talking head is a woman named Aya Rindo, who is known as the Immortal. Not a immortal, but the Immortal, since there's only one of her in the world. She's remained as a 14-year-old for over 1,000 years now, and she's on a journey. Okay, wait, it's not like that. Let me finish. The show isn't like that. Fortunately for Aya, her immortality is quite the commodity, and while she was in the middle of binging season 5 of Friends, someone took her whole body away, except the head. Whole thing, gone. Now she's in a birdcage for possibly the rest of time. But she finds hope in Tsugaru, as the both of them are connected due to the fact that they were afflicted with these conditions by James Moriarty, the man who runs an organization named Banquet, which is filled with a bunch of characters from pop culture like Frankenstein and Jack the Ripper. Tsugaru and Aya make a pact which guarantees that Tsugaru won't succumb to his Oni side thanks to Aya's immortal DNA, and that Tsugaru would travel the world with Aya and Shizuku in their quest to reclaim Aya's body. This pact is initiated by Tsugaru and Aya dirty macking in front of Shizuku. She definitely doesn't get paid enough for this shit. But before they go and take on Banquet, this trio has some supernatural cases to solve. Their first case is to figure out why 99% of my viewers don't subscribe. Unfortunately, they were unable to solve this mystery, so if you've been enjoying this video so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. The trio quickly builds up a reputation of being monster case detectives, famous for having the talking head inside of a birdcage that can seemingly solve any mystery. Most of Undead Murder Farce is the trio going around the planet, running into entirely different cases that are all solved in extremely creative ways. The first couple of episodes focuses on Aya solving the murder of the wife of an influential vampire known as Godard, aka the god of monsters. Through these episodes, we learn about the different tactics that are used to deduce who the perpetrators are during such crimes, as Aya probes everyone involved and points out all the small, suspicious clues that no one would really catch whenever they inspected the case itself. Normally, Aya just spitting out a bunch of dialogue about the case to characters we barely know would be quite boring, but the way Undead Murder Farce shows her thought process and replays what happened during the crime is super creative. Whenever suspects are recalling their alibis, we get to see Tsugaru and Aya observing them while the events unfold right in front of their eyes, instead of the suspects. The visual storytelling for when Aya is uncovering the truth behind a crime builds up tension really well as each involved party gets phased into the shot, not fully taking it up so we can see the expressions of everyone while Aya tells her thoughts about what exactly happened. My favorite example of this is when Aya mentioned the 5 conditions that their murderer had to fulfill in order to execute the crime, and this was symbolized by 5 candles, with each of them losing its flame every time Aya proposed a condition. The crimes themselves are also really intricate and are committed by actual competent characters, which enhances the feeling of suspense even more. Aya piecing together all the little details into a coherent prediction into who the criminal is plays on this and ultimately makes the payoffs for how these crimes get solved a lot more satisfying. We also get a lot of shots from Aya's point of view, which means we can get to see how strong everyone's jaw game is. I really like this attention to detail, since it isn't often that we get to see the point of view of someone speaking up from a literal cage. Through each case, the world building of Undead Murder Farce expands and we get to learn more about the supernatural creatures that roam this this earth. During the vampire case, we find out that vampires are weak to holy water and silver and that they quickly lose their powers if they come into contact with them. Later on, there's a case inside of a werewolf village and we're shown how werewolf society operates and how it suppresses the women and the isolations that werewolves face due to their very nature and how humans despise them for it. The first case Aya was faced with was enticing enough, but Undead Murder Farce really kicks it up during the second arc of the show, which is an extremely thrilling case involving the man, the myth, the legend, the gentleman thief, Arsene Lupin. You know, the Persona guy. It was a joke. It was a joke. I don't want to spoil too much about the case handled here because all I need to do to convince you to watch it is to tell you who is involved. We got Lupin working alongside the Phantom of the Opera, and not only do they have to go against Aya's brilliant mind, but they gotta outsmart the Sherlock Holmes accompanied by Watson. This conflict centers around Lupin stealing an extremely famous gem, and in Lupin style, he sends a letter to the man he's going to rob before he does the deed. This allows for extra security to be placed on the gem, along with contracting the help of Sherlock Holmes and Aya. Surely Lupin can succeed, right? You're underestimating the power of the Persona soundtrack. What follows is an extremely exciting match of wits and strength between Lupin and the detectives he's up against, which involves extremely clever ways to break into the mansion devised by Lupin. We get to see Lupin bamboozle Sherlock, who bamboozles Lupin, who bamboozles Sherlock again. On top of this, there's another party called the Royce Advisory, who basically serve as insurance and exterminate monsters. During all of this, we get to see crazy mid-air fights, complex schemes thought up by only the smartest of geniuses, and a party crashing scene by yours truly, The Banquet. It's such a thrilling stretch of episodes to watch since so many different supernatural beings are at play and they're all squabbling over one small gem. I obviously enjoyed the exhilarating combat during this conflict a lot, but something I really enjoyed were the different approaches taken by Sherlock and Aya. Sherlock opted for the gentleman approach while Aya took the Japanese route, which involved Tsugaru announcing everything falling into their hands like Rakugo. Sherlock Holmes is still Sherlock Holmes though. His knack for catching every little detail is on full display here, to the point where he has actual special eyes, which we see through sometimes, showing us all the little things that weren't apparent upon first glance. Aya and Tsugaru themselves end up being more likable as the series goes on, especially when we find out the more sad elements of their lives, which are often masked by their banter. Aya desperately wants to pass away since she's been alive for so long, and employs Tsugaru since he's an Oni, which are known to be extinct due to the fact that they're extremely strong but not very sturdy at all. He's the only one she can rely on to take her out of her immortal misery. Tsugaru, on the other hand, had made peace with the fact that he was going to go on an Oni rampage before dying, and was actively waiting for that day to come before Aya came around, as he wanted to kill all the humans who made a mockery of supernatural beings and forced them into circus acts. Shizuku's also a total baller. I mean, she's a badass maid that can fight with an insanely cool gun and takes on vampires without breaking a sweat. Need I say more? As I mentioned before, the adaptation for Undead Murder Farce is simply phenomenal. Even though it's done by a studio I don't really know much about, I am familiar with the director Mamoru Hatakeyama, also known as Shinichi Omata. He's the director of Kaguya-sama, which is the most over-the-top creative rom-com ever, and his brilliance shines through in Undead Murder Farce. The action is fantastic, the point of view shots we get are unique and really eye-catching, and the visual storytelling for the crimes and Aya's describing them is simply superb. He storyboarded 6 episodes of this anime, and you can really see the amazing job that he did on this. Seriously y'all, give Undead Girl Murder Farce a try. It's definitely one of the sleeper hits of this year and deserves all the love that it can get.